When the wintry gales of 1610 swept through the coniferous forests of the Carpathian Mountains, the towering sedged castle stood like a colossal black iron nail, driven into the desolate ridge under the cloak of night.
Along the corridors of the uppermost floor, the thunderous tread of heavy boots shattered a sepulchral silence as a royal guard, led by the king's envoy, burst through the heavy oak doors. They encountered no legendary baths of blood. Instead, they found a noblewoman draped in black silk, her countenance as pallid and cold as moonlight, calmly closing a yellowed manuscript before a candelabra. In her eyes lay no terror, only a fathomless, cavernous weariness born of witnessing the ultimate betrayals of humanity. She was Elizabeth Bathory, the woman immortalized in folklore as the Blood Countess, and the wealthiest, yet most profoundly solitary ruler in all of Hungary. This is a chronicle of how class arrogance descends into madness, and how an absolute lust for possession devolves into a self-imposed prison. Adjust your breathing, follow the wailing winds of the valley, and return to the 17th century, a time stained with the color of rusted memories. The dawn of Elizabeth Bathory's life was encased in two of the most illustrious yet volatile surnames of the age, Bathory and Nadesty. In a Hungary perpetually shadowed by Ottoman expansion, survival demanded a ferocity greater than the wolf and a constitution harder than the crag. Elizabeth displayed precocious brilliance in her youth, mastering multiple languages even as she grew accustomed to the agonizing shrieks of dissenters bound to burning stakes. This early desensitization to violence became the first unhealable crease in her psyche. At 15, she wedded Ferenc Nadesty, the Black Knight of Hungary, a man who spent his years at war, leaving behind a bride alone in vast, echoing stone fortresses. During those midnight vigils before the dying embers of the hearth, the young countess realized that for a woman in this iron-blooded world, her only talisman was fear. She began to cultivate a gaze devoid of warmth, looking upon her low-born handmaidens as if they were mere expendable parchment, waiting to be consumed if her early severity was intended to establish authority. Then following Ferenc's death, Elizabeth launched a morbid experiment aimed at capturing youth itself. Within the damp, sunless laboratories of Sedged Castle, she was no longer satisfied with hoarding rare gems. She sought to harvest the bloom from the skin and the radiance from the eyes of the maidens of her domain. She held a fanatical belief that her beauty and power were divine endowments, and that any decay wrought by age was a desecration of the Bathory lineage. During those years known to history as a Red Terror, destiny transformed Elizabeth into a symbol severed from the faculty of human empathy. She devised intricate methods of torment, not for mere carnal pleasure, but to witness the primal humility of life under extreme terror, a darkness required to illuminate her own unattainable sanctity. This marriage of class arrogance and the war against nihilism rendered her a black peony blooming on the precipice of an abyss, exquisite to behold, yet exhaling the fragrance of death with every breath. The overextension of power often creates a blind spot for reason. Elizabeth gradually realized that her secrets, though veiled by layers of stone, were bleeding out through the mountains like a toxic fog. Absurd rumors of bloodbaths spread like venomous vines, strangling her reputation and eventually piquing the apprehension of the Habsburg crown. For the monarchy, a powerful, unmanageable countess with vast territories was a far greater threat than any common murderer. The raid of 1610 was, in truth, a meticulously orchestrated class purge. Her former allies turned their backs, using the most virulent rhetoric to condemn their once noble exemplar. The most agonizing moment was her trial, where, by virtue of her noble Bathory blood, she was forbidden from appearing in court to defend herself. When the envoy announced her sentence, solitary confinement for life within her own bedchamber, Elizabeth merely arched an eyebrow in silent disdain. That night, as she watched the stonemasons lay brick upon brick to erase the last sliver of her sunset, she felt an unprecedented bone-chilling clarity. The final days of Elizabeth Bathory were surrendered to an extreme and suffocating nihilism. In that windowless, hermetically sealed chamber, time ceased to flow, marked only by the occasional spark from a guttering oil lamp dancing upon the stone. She was no longer the mistress who commanded, she had become a tumor lodged in the very heart of her own fortress. Even in the darkness, she insisted on maintaining her regal posture, whispering to a phantom altar as if an invisible retinue of maids still knelt awaiting her decree. She began writing long, unmailable letters to her long-dead husband, filled with venomous curses for her betrayers and desperate laments for her decaying beauty. On the night of August 21, 1614, when a guard peered through the feeding slit and saw her untouched dinner, Elizabeth lay slumped in the corner, her breathing forever stilled. She died with her eyes wide open, staring fixedly at the wall that had bricked up her windows, as if, at the very end, she still sought to pierce through the stone and behold the vast world she had once trampled beneath her feet. Even today, for centuries later, the name of Elizabeth Bathory remains an intoxicating scar upon the face of popular culture, a hallmark of absolute evil. When one gazes upon that portrait of the woman in the black dress with glacial eyes, the oppressive weight of those 17th-century valleys still seems to emanate from the canvas. What she bequeathed to posterity was not territory, but a grim specimen of how absolute power can utterly corrode absolute humanity. She serves as a reminder that when noble blood breeds indifference toward the suffering of one's peers, civilization begins its march toward desolation. She was one of the few figures in history to achieve immortality through the manufacture of terror, maintaining a crystalline paranoia within a veneer of sanctity. Beneath the ruins of Sedged Castle, now smothered by weeds, one can almost still hear that hair-raising sound, the rustle of stiff silk dragging across freezing stone tiles. Her life was an ugly, magnificent pilgrimage, seeking a dark zenith of humanity within the hollow shell of decorum. The saga of Elizabeth Bathory draws to a slow close amidst the perennial mists of the Carpathian Mountains. We are accustomed to hymning the radiant saints, yet we too easily overlook the mortals who weave nightmares within the shadows of power. She was never a master of absolute joy, she was a weary, brittle soul who chose the coldest possible response to her own vast loneliness. She teaches us that a fundamental respect for the lives of others is the only true dignity one carries when finally facing the specter of death. Perhaps you, too, are currently navigating anxieties, encircled by pressure or stifled by your environment. But believe this, in every life, there exists a window toward redemption. As long as there remains within you a single spark of craving for kindness, the darkness can never truly seal your path. May the cautionary shadow of Elizabeth Bathory become the strongest bastion of your psyche.
Gut nicht, and may sweet dreams attend you, far from the gloom.